Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome once again to Career Expert Roundtable. I am Bill, the company's expert, and as always, with me is Abby from Life Work Balance. How are you doing today, Abby?
Doing well. People might notice that I'm in a different position. I'm streaming from a new remote location today, so bear with me if there's any interruptions. Hopefully not. Crossing our fingers. How
No
are you
problem.
doing,
Yeah,
Bill?
I'm doing great. I've actually took a week off, or a little bit over a week off live streaming, so this is my first time back in like something like 10 days. But that's
Yeah.
good because this is the stream where we are here to answer your questions. If you are watching this live on my YouTube channel or on Abby's YouTube channel, or I believe on Abby's Twitch channel,
Twitch.
uh,
Hmm.
yeah, this is where we answer your questions. So anything to do with job search, anything to do with careers, job interviews, resumes, job search strategy, discovery of jobs, uh, networking, all that kind of stuff. It's all good. If you are seeing our faces, you should see a chat box somewhere in the vicinity of our faces. Get in the chat. Let us know what's up with you, and we will do our best to help you out. And just
Yeah.
know that if you are between jobs right now, it's challenging for a lot of people. And the overwhelming thing that always strikes me, and Abby can speak to this, is that job search is a very sort of demoralizing kind of process. You know, there's a
Yeah.
lot of psychology involved and self-questioning and all this kind of stuff. And if you are experiencing that, congratulations, you're normal.
Right. And when it comes to employment, our jobs and our careers provide us with a lot of like inherent value. We are contributing to something bigger than ourselves in most cases. It's a part of our identity. And so if you are in the middle of a job search, you're unemployed, or you are employed and you're trying to get a new job and you just keep getting rejection after rejection or ghosting after ghosting, it can really take a toll on your mental health and well-being. And if you're feeling
Absolutely.
down, if you're feeling like you are alone, if you're feeling like nothing is working out, know that you're not alone, that this is a very common experience of people who are job seekers, regardless of if they're employed or not. And it's tough, and there will be something that will happen for you eventually, which is not necessarily reassuring just because the process can take weeks, if not months. For many people, it takes months. But just know
Yeah.
that the reason for that is because organizations and really you should be searching for the perfect fit. And the perfect fit doesn't just happen. It is, while there is a I don't know, a part that's luck based, you have to, apply to the right job at the right time. There's all these things that can kind of fall into place. If you get hired into the wrong job, you're going to be right back where you are right now in a couple of months because you're going to be unhappy with the fit. So it's a part of the process, and you're not alone.
Absolutely. It's like the ridiculousness of this situation for a lot of people is that right when you are feeling essentially at your lowest point, like Abby mentioned, your sense of self-worth and all this kind of stuff. This is how we all feel, when you're between jobs or whatever. You're not feeling super secure, super good about yourself. That's the moment that you have to endure the most rejection that you've ever encountered in your entire life. And then on top of that, as if that isn't bad enough, it's at that very moment that you also have to appear your most confident, right?
Mhm.
While you're simultaneously experiencing all this at the same time, which is extremely hard to do and extremely challenging. So, if you're experiencing that, that's just part of the process. Congratulations. This is how it looks like for everyone. That's the idea.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And Bill and I have talked many times about how artificial this job search process is. You'll be interviewing for jobs, you'll be job searching, and you have to like put on this show, this facade of who you are, show that you're really confident, that you're the best fit for the position, even if you're not really feeling that way. And that can become exhausting physically and mentally. So it's temporary. Once you do get that job and you can kind of get in the groove with the people that you're working with and the work that you're doing on a regular basis, things start to normalize. But it's not going to feel that way initially. It's going to feel very forced. It's going to feel very fake and artificial. And I'm not quite sure what to do about that. I don't know if there is anything to do about that.
I mean, it's interesting how there's a lot of psychological layers to it. A lot of people, we don't realize how much of our identity and our sense of self-esteem and all that kind of stuff is tied up in, what we
Yeah.
do. If we're like, we see ourselves as a provider for ourselves or our family or whatever, our status symbol, is what we do and all that kind of stuff. And then it feels like, you get the rug pulled out right from under you if, you get laid off or something like that, or you make a change because of other reasons, this kind of thing. Lots of psychological stuff wrapped up in that. It really affects people very, very hard. That this is another dimension to this that I don't think is really acknowledged as
Right.
widely or as openly as it should be. But it's
Well,
but
and I
if
think one of the things to even think about is like if you're meeting someone new, one of the first pieces of conversation when you're getting to know that person is what do you do? And that question, if you are in between jobs or if you're unhappy in your current job, that leads to somewhat of an identity crisis because if you don't know what you do, why you do it, who you do it for, then what do you say in those types of situations? So it's so ingrained into who we are as human beings, providing value to ourselves intrinsically and then also providing value to other people that when it's in this rough patch, gosh, everything feels like it's rough.
Yeah, exactly. And as we mentioned before, get in the chat. Let us know your questions.
Mhm.
We have a question here from K-Tara, if I'm saying that right.
Mhm.
Hello to both of you. I have 6 children. Should I mention it regarding flexible working hours or just not mention it because it could cause prejudice? My gut feeling would be not to mention it unless they really prompted you, like with specific questions or something. What would you say to this, Abby?
Yeah, don't bring it up. Don't bring it up. And it's not necessarily because you are wanting to hide it or you're wanting to withhold information from them, but just like you mentioned in your question, it could cause this bias that they're going to say, "Oh, this person is going to need a lot of time off. They're going to need, they're going to probably call in sick frequently. They're going to start to build a story about the information that you share." So in an interview, they're really, even if they press you, like well, how many children do you really have? That is a question that they should not be asking you during the interview process. It's something that you should feel comfortable enough sharing once you have it, secured that job. But even then, like once you're employed, you don't have to share any of this information with them. It's none of their business. You are, based on where you are in the world, you're probably legally entitled to time off, sick time, PTO, things like that. Um, just so you can care for your family and cover in emergencies if needed. I do think that if you're curious about the flexible working hours, there's other ways to go about that. You don't want to bring up your family as a reason for needing that flexibility. It's one of the questions you could ask at the end of the interview could be, tell me a little bit about the culture of work hours with this organization. Am I expected to start at a specific time and end at a specific time? Those sorts of logistical questions are very appropriate for an interview. But saying, I've got 6 kids, so I'm going to need some flexibility, that will actually put you in the pile of, if there's no one that we love, then we'll probably come back to this person.
It's interesting because, this could go off in several directions in terms of
Mhm.
discussing this. One is the idea that, you're mentioning something that, like, people are throwing around the words prejudice, bias. I mean, personally, I don't see it like that. It's almost like assumptions. But if you say, for example, like I've got a sick parent, or something like that, the assumption that the other party might make then is that, oh, you're going to need a lot of time off to go and take care of them. Now that might not
Yep.
necessarily be true, but the problem is if you disclose something like this that could be seen as a liability or a restriction, there's a very good chance that they may read a lot into that. They may make assumptions or prejudice or whatever you want to call that. But either way, it amounts to the same thing, and that it's not necessarily good for you, to mention stuff like this. So the general rule, I guess, is like Abby was saying, unless they really, ask you very specifically a very pointed question about something, you would generally try and refrain from disclosing things like this that could be seen as a liability, and they may make several assumptions about you because of it. I think that's just a general rule that goes across the board here.
Right. And, many times when this comes up is with the answer to tell me about yourself. When you are answering this type of question, it's feels like a trick question. Like, what do you actually say when you're answering this type of question? Do I talk about where I grew up and how many siblings I have and how many children I have and if I'm married or if I'm caring for aging parents and what that might look like? Um, you don't share any personal information. And that's kind of the rule that you should be following for the entire interview process, unless there's something very specific about your personal world that will make you an even better fit for your professional world. So, for example, a fun fact about me is I have game night every other week with a close group of friends where we play Dungeons and Dragons, and most people wouldn't know that
Uh-oh.
about me. Yeah, so we play Dungeons and Dragons. If I happen to be applying to work for an organization like D&D Beyond or Wizards of the Coast, like there's a bunch of different organizations that I could apply to, I might share that I am, weekly or biweekly playing with a group of friends and have been playing for X number of years and go into detail about the types of characters we play and things like that. In any other situation, I probably wouldn't share that fun fact about myself. So
The
it
dreaded
is
D&D.
situational. Yes, D&D, Dungeons and Dragons. So if
That's
there
how it all
is
begins.
exactly. So if there is any personal information that you want to share, it should be appropriate to the job that you're sharing it with. If you are applying for early childhood education and you have 6 children, then maybe talking about some of your parenting philosophies is a better fit than actually saying I have 6 kids. So there's a time and a place to share that personal information, but most of the time you want to keep that personal information limited.
There's a time and a place behind closed doors for things like D&D.
For
That's
D&D.
just the
Yeah.
reality. That's how it goes. Special thanks to Gagusta One for saying very nice things about us and our videos, et
Mhm.
cetera, et cetera. Thank you. Um, RJ McReady says, I've seen newer resumes that include your picture, these newfangled resumes that the kids are using today. That can also be seen as inappropriate by some HR screeners. Really? That's a new one on me. What is best practice to make a bold impression? I have 25 years of government service. I could have probably predicted that based on what you just said. I don't think putting your picture is necessarily inappropriate. I think that if somebody regards that as inappropriate, they have the problem, not you. That would be my personal opinion on this. What do you say to this, Abby?
It's actually no pictures on resumes. You should not have a picture. You should not have anything like pretty and fluffy on your resume that includes like pictures, font styles, colors, fancy formatting, things like that,
Really?
unless you are yeah. The only times that I would recommend having a picture is like if you are a real estate agent or a realtor, if you are a model or maybe a graphic designer in a very
The type of
creative
person that the
industry.
type of person that uses a two-handed handshake. That's kind of maybe the rule of
Hmm.
thumb. I'm not sure.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
in most cases, um, at least here in the United States, one of the rules is that you want to have a document that really showcases your skills and your abilities and doesn't introduce any potential biases. So they did a study, for example, on 2 identical resumes that just had the name changed, and one was a more ethnic name and one was a very
Uh-oh.
Caucasian name. And even though the document was identical, except for the name, the Caucasian resume was preferred. So if you start to add
By
pictures or,
Caucasians.
well,
Do
actually
we know
all,
that?
I think it was just in general, the resume that was preferred by all hiring managers, and I don't know what the demographics of the hiring managers
Hmm.
and recruiters were, was the Caucasian name. So they're even trying to figure out how this is the like proverbial organizations are trying to figure out how to reduce biases in hiring by anonymizing applications and really focusing on people's skills and qualities and the things that they put as their qualifications, rather than things that can cause these detrimental biases like name and pictures and all of those things. So I think the like hip way to do things might be having your picture on there, but don't do it because it can cause these other problems down the line. And especially if you're in government, stay clean, simple, boring, black and white, nothing fancy, if you're going to continue with government.
Well, Okay, fair enough. And I'm not knocking it, and that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think it sort of uncovers maybe a larger issue, or what I consider to be perhaps a larger issue, which is like, okay, what's considered normal? What's considered
Mm-hmm.
standard? Like industry standard, let's say, okay, um, and then knowing what's mainstream, normal, usual, industry standard, knowing that, should you conform to that, or should you distinguish yourself by stepping outside of it to try and elevate yourself above the crowd? I'm sure you get this a lot, Abby. One of the more popular questions that a lot of job seekers are wondering is, how can I stand out from the crowd, right? Like, how can I
Yeah.
stand out as a good candidate? And uh, here we sort of butt right up against this issue, which is, should you follow the herd or should you step outside of it? And I'm sure different people are going to have different opinions on this. Personally, I would recommend that, just because something is usual, standard, or typical, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's exactly what you should do. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
selectively, strategically, you can make an argument for saying, this is where you should try and distinguish yourself, elevate yourself above the crowd, and stand out. That gives you a hint of personality, a hint of individualism, and that can work to your advantage. Obviously, it's going to depend on the situation. It's going to depend on your personality and your attitude towards this.
Mm-hmm.
But for example, for me personally, something like this, putting your picture on your resume, I understand the counter argument, but I would actually push for it. I would say, like, look, this might be an opportunity for you to stand out in a stack of resumes. They all
Mm-hmm.
look the same. They all have the same font. They all have the same format. Here, you have a chance to sort of say, okay, I'm standing out from this. I'm an individual. I have a personality. You know what I mean? So I think that
Yeah.
that's a legitimate thing. I don't think it should be seen as inappropriate. I think that it's a choice that one can make. And in certain industries where a bit of personality, a bit of daring is rewarded, like in sales, for example, which I would say would be probably the polar opposite to government, you know,
Right.
maybe that would be the approach to take.
Hmm. And I don't disagree. I think you make a really good point. Um, I think my argument, like, or counterpoint to that might be, if you have a direct connection to someone, if I'm going to go in person, or if I have an email to someone that's a real person that I know they're going to receive this email, then I might personalize things a little bit further. If I know that I'm going to be applying to the black hole of HR applications, I think that it's probably, and this is, maybe a problem for the HR industry, but I bet that the recruiters and the people who are filtering the applications after the computer system does initially will make some judgments about professionalism and, fit and all of that before it goes to a hiring manager. So what I usually recommend is, with people who have really pretty resumes, in my opinion, where they've got cool fonts, they've got this like template where it's multiple columns. I
And you
recommend
print it
printing that
on
out.
ink scented paper, that kind of thing.
Yes, yes, and you have glitter and all the things. You print that out and you bring that with you to your interview, or you bring that with you to go introduce yourself to someone. And it's like a hard copy that they can have. And then you have your boring HR version that you use to submit to any application. Just because I think that there are biases that HR is trying to prevent occurring from a hiring manager through the application process. And who knows what that ultimately looks like on the back end. I'm sure it's different for every organization. But I would say that if you are going to be including a picture on your resume, it's got to be for an industry that it's appropriate. And if you want to stand out through networking and introducing yourself and, being remembered, having a person, a real human being that you can give that document to rather than just submitting it to the black hole, that's a good strategy for sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's not going to be one correct answer to this. There's
Hmm.
different people are looking for different things. Some people are looking for the safe choice, very conservative. They want someone
Hmm.
that doesn't stand out. They want someone that's exactly as predicted. There's no risk, right? Other people in different situations are looking for someone that has a bit of an edge, a bit of a sense of individuality. I can't speak today.
Right.
So there's not going to be a one size fits all answer. It really depends on your industry. It also is a function of you. I think that if you are an individual, you have an edge to you. There is definitely going to be a factor in what represents you correctly. We were talking earlier about, getting an appropriate job, getting a job that fits you. If there's a huge mismatch between you and the role that you're stepping into, it is not going to work out. And this is perhaps a very early version of that surfaces some of those ideas.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Gagusta says, hard no, it's your personal business. That's right. It's time to take a personal stand.
And I think that was in relation to the question where it was like, do I tell people that I have 6 kids? No.
That makes a lot of
Keep
sense.
your personal life separate, at least during the interview process, because people make lots of judgments. We fill in the gaps and it could be used against you.
And if you don't hire me for this job, I'm going to send those 6 kids round to your house, and then you'll have some explaining to do. Matthew Harding says, hello. I'd like to explore negotiating increased severance benefits for my next job. I've been laid off twice in the past 5 years, and it seems to becoming even more common in my industry. Thoughts? My immediate thoughts are you probably wouldn't want to do this in the interview process. That would be something you would do after you get the job, but it's certainly a legitimate thing to address. Yeah. Yep.
And that's something that, I'm not quite sure even when I would recommend starting that process. It's one of those things where you get hired in the job, you probably want to work for a couple of months to get some security in your position. Maybe you want to wait until your probationary period is done. And then you probably go to HR and ask them what the severance benefits package looks like, if there's any flexibility, things like that. Now, if it would be a determining factor on if you're going to accept the job or not, then there's probably a way to get some of that information earlier in the process. But it's a red flag. If they're like, oh, this person is expecting to get laid off, or this person is asking about these compensation benefits that are not things that we want to talk about right now, that could then put you lower in the priority list of hiring because you bring it up earlier in the interview process.
Yeah, I agree. And it might also make sense to bring it up along with a few other HR issues so it doesn't stand out. Like, I want a conversation with you about severance pay. Like you would bring up a couple of things, perhaps some trivial things, but this would be buried in there. And I would say, like, do it after you've started, after you've sort of proven yourself, maybe 6 months in at least, and it's clear that you're overcoming the learning curve, you're fitting in, everything's working out, and then, I just wanted to address some of these ancillary HR issues altogether, something like that. I don't think there's any issue with that. That would be the right timing. That would be the context. And then you could do that.
Well, I would say, even if it's becoming more common in your industry, that doesn't mean it's going to happen with your organization. So, like, for example, in the time that I've worked for government, many government organizations have experienced furloughs, but the government organizations that I've worked for have intentionally chosen not to furlough employees. So if I were to randomly bring up a conversation about furloughs, everyone would be wondering where this was coming from and why I was asking these questions and things like that. So it's organization specific too. So maybe it's having conversations with people in your working group and saying, have layoffs ever been a conversation that you've been worried about? Asking some of those questions before bringing it up and trying to discuss a severance package before severance is even an option.
Yeah, this is also another, to me anyway, it seems it's like another larger principle, which is that I understand that this is something that you want to get into and you want to have squared away and have it addressed properly. And, ideally you would want to know this when you're deciding what job to take, like back in the interviewing process before you're even employed with them. I understand that. And that makes a lot of sense. However, the problem is that when you address certain issues, this maybe being one of them, it can actually hurt your chances of getting hired with the company initially, right? You're talking about something that you don't front load, something that comes after, right? It's like they don't hire people according to what their severance requirements might be. You know what I mean? So
Right.
that's what makes it a little bit tricky, a little bit strategic. Even though this is very important to you, you would intentionally not bring it up
Hmm.
because it could hurt your chances. You would strategically bring it up later and refrain from mentioning it until you're in there, you're employed, you're over any kind of probationary period, that kind of stuff, right? So there's several issues like this, stuff that you want to know right up front. The problem is that it can hurt your chances if you bring it up front. That's the problem. It isn't
Yeah.
just this one.
Yeah. Which goes
Um,
into the conversation we were having much earlier about how this is such an artificial process. Like
yeah,
in the perfect world, you would be free to talk about all these things that are concerning you, and they would be free to talk about the things that are concerning them. But we're all putting on our best faces. We're all, showing the most confidence, and it's just such an artificial environment that it's hard to navigate.
absolutely. And that's part of like interpersonal skills where you recognize that certain things you have to be a bit strategic about it. You may want to bring it up. You may want to address it directly. They may not want to. And if you try and bring it up artificially and they don't want to talk about it, it can be bad. So you have to have
Right.
the awareness of that. Not everybody has that. It takes a little while to develop those skills for some people.
Hmm.
Too much interest, but I have 4 kids to take care of now. And yeah, you do not want to keep these people waiting. AI is here. That's awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
You should have called yourself Big Brother or something. That would have been even better. It says, hello, I graduated in engineering. That explains so much in 2021 and have been successfully investing since then. And now I want to get my first job. So you've been investing first and now you want to get a job. That's usually the opposite of most people that do both of those things.
Hmm.
How to present myself as a stable and less risky candidate. Well, how much time do you have? These are the
Yeah.
types of questions I don't do well at because they're so general. Where would you start
Yeah.
with this,
Well,
Abby?
Well, and the next comment is also from this person where they say, I feel that they judge me based on being out of the job market for years and also might not stay due to my investing background. It's tricky.
Yeah,
Really, what you want to do is, if this was someone who was self employed and had like a formal organization that they worked under an umbrella, then it would be much easier because you could say, like, you worked for this company and you can demonstrate some employment background and history and things like that. Um, because you graduated in 2021 and then haven't been formally employed, you've got to figure out a way to present your skills in a way that is interesting to an organization. You know, like you said, but we could spend hours on this just alone. It goes into like what specific type of engineering, what your compensation requirements are. If you feel like you've been successfully investing, you might be making more money with your investments right now than you would with an entry level engineering role. So then is it worth it to you to make that type of switch? So there's all these questions that come up with this questions from me that come up with this question from this person. Um, Really what it comes down to is probably identifying times where you had to behave in a professional way, volunteer opportunities, projects that you may have worked on, client work that you may have done. Maybe you have a couple of people personally who you work with regularly to help them with investments. So you can show that you might, be doing sales or client work, something like that. And you've got to figure out the best way to present it to an engineering firm or company in a way that matters to them. So that's one of the hardest parts about working on a resume is we write our resumes for us. We're really proud of the things that we've accomplished. We're really wanting to, show off our accomplishments, our accolades, our things like that. And many times the people who are looking to hire us don't care about those things unless it's directly relevant to the position that we're applying to. So you've got to figure out what from the last couple of years really matters to the people who would be hiring you. And if you feel like you're lacking some of those things, then now is the time to start proactively building your skills and your resume to be more in line with what those hiring managers might like. So are there certifications that you can take? Can you, take some new classes or continue education to bring yourself back up to speed with the things that you've been maybe missing out on by not being in the job market or the workforce for the last couple of years. So those are ways that I would suggest starting to present yourself as a stable and less risky candidate, to figure out ways that you can kind of supplement your lack of experience with additional education, training, and transferable skills from your experience that you had over the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's an interesting problem. It's similar to people that they they work for themselves for a couple of years. They start their own business. They work for themselves. Maybe 5 years later, they find themselves like, okay, I'm going to go back to the job market. I've done my entrepreneurial kind of thing, and it was good, but for whatever reason, now I'm looking to get a more conventional job and do that again. So you have the same problem, which is when you look at your work history, there's some questions raised because you don't fit into this little pigeonhole that a lot of recruiters are trained to. They're assuming that you've worked as an employee for other organizations, so they can just compare apples to apples. You don't fit into that mold, and in that case, the problem is if that you have this problem where if I mention what I've been doing most recently, it counts against me. If I say like, oh, I work for myself, for 5 years, then the assumption or the prejudice or whatever you want to call it comes in and say, oh, if we hire you, you're the type of person that is not only capable of doing their own thing, but also wants to do their own thing. And you're overqualified. If we hire you, the moment you can get your own thing established again on the side, that's what you're going to do. That's where your loyalties lie. And that's a liability for us because, you're not going to be tuned into working for us. You're going to be tuning into making your own thing happen. So that makes you an undesirable candidate, a high risk candidate.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. We see that as a liability. So first of all, you got the problem where your work experience is actually really, really good. We know that if you have the capability of working for yourself, of turning your value into income directly without an employer, without an agent to do that for you, right? That's a very good thing. You have a lot of skills and a lot of capabilities that most people don't have.
And have probably built your skill and abilities in a way that any other traditional employee never would. Like, you probably
Yeah,
know more about business and then client interactions and sales and like actually doing the job. So that's like 4 different roles compared to someone who's just in like the business management side of things, someone who's just in sales. So you're
it was only
likely
ever
a
been
much
an
more
employee.
well-rounded. Yeah, yeah, you're likely much more well-rounded, but because you're more entrepreneurial, that's scary.
Yeah, because they're questioning your loyalty and your commitment. So where I was going with this is my usual advice for that. Anything where you don't fit into the sort of typical employee profile. Either you're changing careers or you have a very long work gap or you were, an entrepreneur for several years and now you're coming back into the workforce. Anything that steps outside of that traditional mold, I would say networking is probably going to be your way in. It's the way to like overcome any and all of those non-standard elements, right? Once people see you for who you are and your capabilities, they can see your commitment, they can see that you have a lot to offer. um, that kind of trumps a lot of these perceived disadvantages, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah. And the other way to go about it, for example, I'm currently working with a client who's been job searching for over a year. They have had their own business as an accountant. And so they've been doing like consulting and client work from their own business perspective. And they're trying to get into government work. And this person is really struggling with just getting any interest. And one of the strategies we've taken is, how do we essentially show that they've been doing the same work that they're applying to do in a way that isn't an entrepreneurial focus. So can we, just show that this person is more of an accountant rather than like an owner or a founder or investor, whatever that might be for the company that they have started, changing their job titles to match other things on their resume that might match the job description even better. So there's a strategic way you can present yourself that isn't lying, but also isn't really showing the full story, because you know that if they know the full story, they're going to make some judgments about you.
Yeah, and that also might contradict with their strategy of like, the people who can be entrepreneurs, we want them out there being entrepreneurs. We don't want to get all of them to come and be a part of the government. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
So I mean, there's a lot of layers to that.
Right.
Let's see, we got Kate Tara. Thank you very much. You're absolutely welcome, Kate Tara. Mustafa Tim, thank you. Bye. That's hey, straight to the point.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, thank you for the stream and all videos of Joe. We are absolutely welcome. Thank you for being here.
Yes.
Gugusta, my close personal friend, says the longer down the interview process that passes before I give them a photo of me, the better off we'll all be. Hey, I can see your photo. You put a photo right there. It's you and your dog. Or at least that's the
Yes.
assumption or the prejudice that I'm under right now.
Mm-hmm.
The prejudice, sort of the whole dog ownership prejudice thing that we all can't get away from.
Right.
Kate Tara. What are acceptable questions for the first interview? Like that you ask back to the interviewer? Is that what you're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
I try to ask follow-up questions regarding the job profile, but sometimes I feel nervous to ask about compensation right then. You say, hey, let's talk turkey. Let's get down to brass tacks. How much do you guys pay? Right? Just the direct approach is the best approach. What would you
Yes.
say to this, Abby?
I actually have a video that is questions you should ask at the end of your first interview. And the reason why this, I think, subject is different from any other interview that you might be a part of, and I'll put this in the chat. If you're watching on my Twitch stream or my YouTube stream, you'll probably see this come through the chat. If you're not watching it on mine, you're watching it on Bill's, you might not see that comment go through. So just so you know, let us know if you can or cannot see that comment or chat edition. The reason why your first interview might be different is because you might be meeting with someone from HR, the recruiter, an HR generalist, someone who doesn't have all the details about the position that you might be applying to. You might also be meeting with the hiring manager, and you want to demonstrate your enthusiasm and your forward thinking and things like that. So there are lots of questions that are acceptable at the first stage of the interview process. I think one of the most important questions to ask is, what does the rest of this interview process look like? That gives you an idea of how many rounds you can expect. If they're saying, well, this is the only interview, then you might know that there is some other questions you should be asking that you wouldn't plan on asking in the first interview. If they say there's 5 more interviews, then it's like, holy cow, tell me a little bit about those interviews. What can I expect from each of those interviews? How long are they going to be? Who are they going to be with? When can I expect to hear back from you? All of those more logistical questions, totally great to ask at the very beginning, the like first stage interview process. Some other things to ask is like, tell me a little bit about this position. Is it a new position? Is it a vacated position? If it's a position that was previously filled by someone, what were some of the things that they did really well that you want to see continue in this position? And what are some of the things that they didn't do as well that you want someone new to bring to this role? Asking some of those questions are good. And then, as usual, if you watch any of my videos on questions to ask at the end of an interview, I also think you should ask some cultural questions. This can be a kind of a confusing term. Not cultural, like, where did you grow up and tell me about your favorite type of food, but based off of the culture of the organization. These are typically more feel-good questions to get the other person talking. And this is important from a psychological perspective. The more talking the interviewer does, the better they feel the interview goes. So if they're just asking you question after question and you're responding and then it ends, they might feel like the interview went well. But if you can get them talking about themselves, their experiences, what they like most about working in this organization, that does like this brain trick in their brain where they're like, wow, this person really cares about me. I like this person. I think this interview went really well because they did a little bit more talking. So there's lots of ways
So
that you can
tell me
go
about
with questions at
you.
the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's like the time to say, in preparation for this interview, I looked you up on LinkedIn. It looks like you've been at this company for 3 years. What's been your favorite thing about working here over the last 3 years? What's been the most challenging thing? Just getting them to talk about themselves, great strategy.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's definitely a part of it. This, to me, falls under the category I was talking about earlier, where it's something that, you clearly want to know, right? This is very important to
Mhm.
you. How much they pay is pretty damn important. The problem is that if you like bring this up directly, in the first interview, it's like, look, let's level just for a second here. How much do you guys pay? The problem is that there's all kinds of issues bringing that up right up front, because it suggests that, you're the type of person, you're not really that committed to the job. You don't really care about the work itself. Your head's at, how much am I going to get paid? That's why you're here. That's what's motivating you. And that only, right? That's the impression it makes when you bring this up directly. So what
Yep.
I would recommend, and this is going to be controversial for some people, but what I'd recommend is try to resist the temptation to bring this kind of thing up, at least
Mhm.
like until you get further down the process, at least, and resist that temptation, because although this is extremely important to you, bringing it up hurts you. Okay. It gives the
Yes.
impression that that's all you care about. That's where your head's at. I care about what I can get out of this, and not like having a great relationship between you and me, and we fit. I do exactly what you need, and it's a perfect fit for me. You're not thinking about that. You're only thinking of like, how much do I get paid? You know, right? So
Yep.
so get the job first. Get them to fall in love with you and want to pick you. And then at the
Yep.
offer stage, where you're, having to sign a contract and they're filling in numbers and things like that, then you can maybe kick it around a little, right? But not till the
Yep.
offer stage. That's what I would say.
Yes. And, like you mentioned this question, I feel nervous about asking about compensation right then during the first interview. Don't ask about compensation in the first interview. That's something that is kind of another rule to follow. Ideally, perfect world, the
Hmm.
recruiter or the hiring manager, whoever you're talking to, brings it up in the first interview because it is an important discussion point that is a deal breaker for people. It's either enough or it's not enough. And if it's not enough, let's find out as early as possible. Many times, organizations don't bring up the pay conversation until much later because they're hoping that you are going to really love them and that they're going to love you, and that the pay isn't going to be a deal breaker. It might be lower in other industries, or than other industries, it might be lower than their competitors. And so they're hoping that by going through the interview process that they'll be able to offer you other things beyond pay if that is a problem. Um, I wish it wasn't this way. I wish the hiring manager and the recruiter would be upfront about it from the beginning. If they don't bring it up in the first interview, I would wait until probably the third round of interviews to bring it up and see if they offer up any information about it in the second round. If there's a third round, if they bring it up then. And if not, then I think it's time for you to say, I've already put in, potentially 3 hours or more of time interviewing with this organization. I need to make sure this is going to be worth it for me and worth it for them. So you start that conversation by basically saying, like, can you tell me a little bit about the hiring budget for this position? Or can you tell me about the salary band? Something like that to get the conversation
Can you
going.
help me
I
understand the compensation structure is a good way of saying it. So
exactly.
higher level
And
thing.
having them give you some numbers before you give numbers is the best strategy, just because then you know what they're working from. Many times, if a salary range is posted on a job, it's the full salary range for that position. And it's unlikely you'll get towards the top unless you have significant experience. So that's why I like asking about the hiring range for the position rather than the salary range for the position, because it shows you what the lowest salary is for that role and the highest salary is for that role. And there's usually some like years of experience that you have to have and maybe tenure with the organization to get up to that higher band. So I always recommend starting with that like hiring range. Um, and ideally, the organization brings it up before you do. And ideally, they provide you with a range of numbers before you provide a range of numbers. But you can usually figure out what the information is by just doing some research, whether it's on the industry, the organization. You can calculate some like cost of living stuff. You can probably find information on Glassdoor. So do your research ahead of time as well so that you can understand if this is going to be worth your time or not. If you don't do your research, then you might be blindsided by a very low number or even a much higher number that you weren't expecting. So do your research, make sure that you have kind of a number in mind of what you're expecting to hear from them, what you would be willing to accept, and then you can kind of go from there.
Let me sort of make an analogy with this. Okay, uh, let's pretend that you're going to shop for a car or something. Okay, I know that doesn't happen every day for everybody, but imagine you're like trying to shop for a car. Okay, and you're getting some kind of really high pressure salesperson that's kind of you're dealing with, right? And you show up there and you say like, okay, I see there's various cars here. Could you tell me more about them? And they say, okay, well, this one's red and it's $45,000. Now, is that kind of what you want to spend? You want to spend $45,000, or maybe like 40 or 50? What are we talking about here? And you're like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know anything about the car. I know it's red, but can you tell me more about it? And they say, well, yeah, we could get into that later, but how much do you want to spend? Because this is $45,000. Is that enough? And it's like, well, I don't want to discuss price until I actually see the damn car. You understand? Like how would you fare in that person's shoes? You're not willing to discuss price right off the bat. Show me the car. Let's maybe take it for a test drive, and then maybe I might want to then discuss price because I know more of what I'm getting, right? That's
Right.
kind
And
of the
just because I'm
situation in that
seeing
first
this
job
doesn't mean
interview.
it's worth a certain amount. Right,
Yeah, that's kind
right.
of the situation in the first job interview. It's like we barely know who you are. It's kind of silly to just like let's immediately talk like price, like how much money do you need?
Mhm.
You know what I mean? On your side, you barely know this job. You know like a paragraph that they wrote in a job posting, and
Which
already we're
may or
now
may not be
engaged. Yeah,
accurate. Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
It
So
might be the, like, bare minimum that every single job that's assigned the same title has, that is not even close to the work that you'd be doing or detailed about the work that you will be doing.
and the other factor is that if you bring up like price right at the beginning, most people are going to say like, okay, well, I'm only prepared to pay a very little amount. Okay, I'm you want to talk price? It's a red car. That's all I know. I don't know, $15,000. Like, let's, that's what I'm prepared to pay. Right now, if you had, as a customer who's wanting to buy a car, if you had the opportunity to learn all about the car. You took it for a test drive. You drove it around a residential area. Then you drove it on the highway. Then they showed you all the fancy features of the car and all its capability, its gas mileage. As you know more about it, you're getting more interested in it. You're sort of liking the idea of buying that car more. And all the while, the price you're willing to pay, maybe in your head, is going up because I'm seeing more
Mhm.
value. I'm seeing kind of like, ooh, that's kind of cool. Ooh, that's got this feature. I didn't know about that feature before. This has it. Oh, I didn't know that. So now, like, the amount of money you're willing to pay goes up and up and up, and up the more you learn about it, right? So that's kind of what's going on in job interviews. When you walk in and they don't know you, they're probably not willing to pay you a lot of compensation. But the more you go down this process, they get to know exactly what your background is, what your capabilities are, all your different education and training you can bring. And they've gotten a taste of your communication skills and your charisma. And like now it's like, okay, I can see the value of this candidate more and more and more. And the more I learn about them, the more I'm prepared to pay for them. That's how these things often work. The problem is that candidates can be very impatient. They want to talk money right off the bat, and that hurts them. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So
Yep.
that's one of the things going on with this question of like compensation and how you should handle it. That's definitely a factor. So the bottom
Mhm.
line is you should resist the temptation to bring this up. You should bring it up as late as you possibly can so they see as much of your value as possible before they start they're pressed for like how much money you need and all this kind of stuff.
Yep.
Um, Candidates that show up and say like, okay, how much does it pay? Oh, okay, well, it's not worth my time to talk to you. They usually don't get offered a lot of money when you take that approach.
Mhm.
That's the problem.
Right, because it's so transactional. And while, yes, the job market can be very transactional, the goal is to find someone who wants you just as bad as you want them. And so they're willing to pull some strings and go to bat for you and try to get you as much as possible because they want you just as much as you want them. And you can't figure that out in the first interview after just talking to someone. So I love the car buying analogy because it is true. I might be okay with the bare minimum, factory standard car that's coming out because I'm only willing to pay $15,000. But if I want all the bells and whistles and I want special wheels and tires and a special paint color and I want leather seats versus carpet seats and I want all this technology, then I'm slowly increasing what I'm willing to pay
Yeah,
for
the
those extra
more you
things.
see of what you can get, and the
Mhm.
more you like it, the more you're open to it, your price starts to go up. I'll maybe,
Yeah.
okay, maybe I'll pay more because that is kind of cool. Yeah, that's what makes one of the things that makes this question so challenging.
Yeah.
Key Terra says, "What about asking for home office possibilities? It is a good question to ask, or does it come across as you do not want to drive into the office?" I'm going to let
So
you
I would
handle that
say
one. I think you know more than me.
yes. In most cases, if remote work is an option, it would be listed on the job posting. So if it's listed as remote, hybrid, or in office, you should see that somewhere on the job posting. Now, if you don't, then I think it's appropriate to ask a questions like, what does a typical week in this position look like? And see if they say, yeah, well, we're expecting you to be in the office 3 days a week. The other 2 days a week, you would be, able to work from home, or this is a completely remote job, but we would expect you to be on, Zoom calls every single day, like asking questions that then give you answers to these other questions in a strategic way is how I would go about doing it. I wouldn't say, tell me about the ability to work remotely right off the bat. Um, Again, just because it's one of those things that becomes an indicator that you're looking for something that maybe they're not looking for either. And if it is something that is possible, it should be listed on the job posting already. Um, so that's kind of the short answer to that. Do you have anything you'd like to add, Bill?
Well, it follows that kind of same principle we've touched on with several things, including the salary thing, which is like if you want something that is good for you, but it's not necessarily something that they want to give, I would try and address that as late as possible in the process. Ideally, when you've got the offer, because if you get them to just fall in love with you and they want to hire you, and then you turn around at the offer stage and say like, I don't know, I really need like to be remote 2 days of the week. Like, is that a deal breaker? Chances are, you know, they have the most pressure pushing them to say yes at that point. They've already decided on
Yes.
you. They already want to hire you. And you just have this little thing that you need. It's like, it's
Hmm.
rather than having you mention that the moment they meet you and saying, hey, before we go any further, just so you know, I need to be like remote 2 days a week. They'll be like, oh, okay, well, thank you for telling us that. And then they eliminate you, and then they only speak to other people that aren't remote. You know what I mean? Uh, so it kind of falls under that category where if you're asking for something, you're pushing for something, it's a showstopper for you. I'd bring it up later. Controversial because a lot of people don't want to do that. You would like to not waste your time and bring it up first, but the problem is that really kills your chances. So that's the
And if
trade.
you don't want to waste your time, then only search for jobs that are clearly remote or hybrid.
Yeah.
If they have that advertised as part of the job posting, that clears it up quickly. If there's no advertisement on the job posting that it's hybrid or fully remote, chances are it's probably not. Organizations are starting to move more towards in office as much as, people may or may not like that. And if they don't say that it's a hybrid schedule is available or remote options are available, then they probably aren't available, at least at the beginning. And so I know pre-COVID, that was some of the things that would come up for me in the job search. So I worked for organizations that would allow us to work from home a couple of days a week or once a week. And so while that wasn't something that I brought up during the interview process, it was something that I explored once I got hired. So, I talked to my coworkers, does anyone work from home? Oh, there's this one person who lives an hour away and they work from home every day of the week, but come in staff meetings, or our team works remote, but we each pick one day. There's conversations that you can have once you're hired if that is really important to you, but not a deal breaker. If it's a deal breaker, look only for jobs that have that advertised and don't apply for jobs that don't advertise it, because the chances of them integrating that to match what you're looking for is probably slim.
Yeah, that's the trade-off. That's the trade-off. There's a lot of
Yeah.
people that could accommodate it if they really wanted
Mhm.
to, but it's not their first
Mhm.
choice, right? So if you lead with that, they
Yeah.
just eliminate you. If you, the longer you delay, the more chance that, you could get it, right? Because they
Mm-hmm.
want to hire you and they're willing to make a
Yep.
couple of concessions to get you, yeah.
Yep. And the
Uh,
trade-off then is you have fewer jobs to apply to. If I'm going to say I'm only going to apply to jobs that allow me to work remote fully, there are significantly less jobs that are available, and they are probably hirely, that's not the word, but they're probably more competitive. There are probably more people applying to those types of jobs than the people who are applying to in-person jobs. So there's a trade-off if you are going to be very specific about what you want and need and what you're willing to accept.
yeah. And just as a reminder, I mean, listen, different strokes for different folks, but this is what I would recommend. Excuse me. If you are going to so many interviews that you're having to turn down interviews, people want to bring you in for an interview, but you're taking so many interviews this week that you can't fit it in, then I can understand saying, well, I don't want you to waste my time, by talking to you
Mm-hmm.
if you can't answer this question right off the hop, right? But
Right.
unless you're in that situation, I would say go and entertain these. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't
Yeah.
kill your chances by bringing up demands and things like in the first interview or at the very early stage, saying, I need it remote, I need this salary, like just saying, like announcing that right up front, because what that does is there are jobs out there where they could have given you that, but they, when someone like gives them an ultimatum like right up front, your natural reaction is going to be like, no, like, sorry, you know
Yeah. Put the
um
brakes on. We're not moving
yeah,
forward.
exactly. So like, okay, I understand, you don't want, your time wasted by like talking to people in interviews,
Mhm.
but you know, if the priority is to get a good job as quickly as possible, I would say entertain these. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Rather
And
than
like
giving them
worst case,
ultimatums.
yes. And worst case is you get a job that doesn't match your ideal situation, but they love you. And then you have a conversation with your supervisor a couple months in saying, hey, what do you think about this? Slowly planting the seeds. And then eventually something will probably get there. And that's, you know, I think there's instant gratification that's needed a lot these days. It doesn't work that way with relationships. And you are building a relationship with your potential employer through this interview process. And if you burn them by being too demanding, having too high of expectations, they are not going to give you the time of day. So it's going to make your job search longer. It's going to be more uncomfortable for you from a financial situation. Maybe you are currently employed and you hate that job and you need something else. Like there's all these things that come into play because we have too many demands. So keep that list of demands short. That's one of the things that I tell clients when I'm working with them. I suggest that they come up with the things that they want and the things that they need. That need list should be short. The want list can be long. It's great if a job checks all those boxes with all the wants that you have, but the needs should not be limiting your job search. And if it is, then you need to evaluate what you're actually looking for.
Absolutely. Yotsuba, if I'm saying that right, says, I quit my last job as a brand ambassador for charity in September for not making enough money. Now I'm searching for a new role targeting towards business consulting and strategy skill set. And then it continues. My last two jobs didn't provide me the necessary work experience suited for this, as they were just jobs I managed to find. How can I start branding myself or showcasing my skills to attract the network? Um, what does it say? To get hired. Okay, so earlier in your question, you say I'm searching for a new role targeting towards business consulting and strategy. Um, that's a whole universe of different things, going from like working for giant organizations like McKinsey and Boston Consulting Group, all the way down to just being a freelance person that essentially you're
Mhm.
doing gig work and you're working for yourself. Uh,
Yep.
if it's the latter, I would say like start doing it. Start like actually trying to sell your services to clients.
Mhm.
Whoever those would be businesses. Whatever. Um, and you're going to see exactly what you're up against. Okay. You need to have credibility. You need to have a reputation. People need to be aware of you. Now, if you don't have that, if you've never built those relationships, it's going to be tough. Because if they don't know you, it's hard to say, yes, I'm going to buy your advice, you know? Whereas if you're working as like a faceless employee deep down in the bowels of a giant consulting firm, they don't need to know who you are. You're getting a job just like any other job. And you know what I mean? Your reputation as a consultant is based purely on the brand of the organization that you represent. So, you know what I mean? Like there's different things in there that are different challenges, and you go about getting that consulting work through different ways, right? So that's probably
Yeah.
the longest non-answer I think I've ever given, but I don't know if that frames it a bit better.
Well, and I think it kind of, again, goes along the lines of the responses we gave to the question earlier, which was that I haven't had my first real job. I've gone straight into investing. How do I, show that I'm a stable and less risky candidate? Really, what it comes down to is framing your experience, whether it's paid or unpaid, as long as it was in a professional capacity, framing it in a way that is beneficial to the organization that you're applying to, if you are wanting to apply to an organization. Um, the more experience you can get in this field now, the better, whether that's taking certifications, trainings, attending webinars, joining professional associations, attending conferences. All of those things will help give you a much better foundation to be a quality candidate for those types of roles. But it's not going to be easy. Um, I think that when you switch industries, especially if you've never been in that industry before and you have kind of a gap of employment, then there's lots of things that you have to be able to do to demonstrate that you are a viable candidate who's going to be a great fit for the role in the organization. It's not impossible, but it will take some work on your end to showcase your skills in that way.
Yeah, essentially, the way I look at it is like you're changing careers. That you
Hmm.
approach it the same way you would if you were changing careers, because that's essentially what you're doing. You're saying like, okay, I've done this before, but now I want to move into consulting. You're changing careers. You know, you have to do that. And the short answer for me, for people who are changing careers, how do they go about doing that? Is I would basically say go through networking.
Hmm.
It's hard for recruiters to look at a resume for someone who's doesn't have any work experience in the industry that they're applying for and
Hmm.
select them. You know what I mean? Like recruiters look for experience. They look for prior experience, years of experience. They look for some of the more sophisticated ones use like look for like transportable skills and things like this that they can sort of but that requires an understanding of the nature of the work. That's something that not all recruiters have. I mean,
Right.
this you could maybe speak more about that, Abby, but that's kind of my understanding of it.
Well, and it's also why many interviews include behavior-based questions, because past behavior indicates future behavior. And it's kind of the same thing. Past experience indicates future experience. Like, what foundation do you have that's going to set you up for success in this role? So we need to be able to evaluate if what you've done in the past is relevant to what you'll be doing in the future. And if you don't have any of that, if you haven't demonstrated your proactivity, if you haven't demonstrated your openness to learn, grow, and develop, then why would they waste their time on you?
Yeah, and it leads to that catch 22 where you know
Mhm.
people like for example, the purest case of this is like new graduates where they perceive this catch 22 where it's like no one's going to hire me because I no one's hiring me because I don't have any experience, but I can't get experience because no one's hiring me, right? So the question
Yep.
becomes how do I break that deadlock? And the answer is networking.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
you go and you talk to the hiring managers and not necessarily a recruiter, uh, and they hire you because they know you, they like you, they've had conversations with you, they can see that you're genuinely enthusiastic about doing this. They can see that you have
Right.
some real skills. You're very professional. You have good communication skills. You have a passion for doing this, et cetera, et cetera. So it's for that reason that they'll give you a chance in the beginning, right? That's the idea. So that's why networking can be that can be. It doesn't mean it always will be, but it can be that tiebreaker that will break that catch 22 and allow you to get your foot in the door when you're changing careers, right? Okay, the next question. Joe Price says, I went from acting director to operations manager when I was moving to a sister company after acquisition closure by owners. Do recruiters typically see that negatively or as a sign of trust and retention? Okay,
Mhm.
my initial gut reaction to this is who cares? Because if you're an acting director or ops, like if those are like legitimate titles, and that's literally what you were. Director means you're a manager of managers, and
Mhm.
to operations manager, if you're at like a at least mid-level management, then you'd be getting stuff through the hiring managers directly rather than trying to convince a recruiter you know what you're talking about. You know what I mean? Usually for management positions, people get them through networking. That's usually how it goes. Not 100%, but there's a reason for that, because if you are a real manager in the sense that you are entrusted to make decisions about something that's valuable to the organization, they have to trust your judgment. It's not a question of what your qualifications are. It's not even a question of past precedent. They have to trust you that you will make the right decisions. And how do you trust someone that you don't know? It's pretty tough. You have to get to know them, and you have to see that, yeah, their head's in the right place. Because I'm
Mhm.
sure we've all seen examples of people that have PhDs whose judgment is just out to lunch. You know, we've seen people that have 45 years experience doing a job, but their judgment is just out to lunch. You know what I mean? We've also
Yep.
seen examples
Yep.
of kids right out of school that don't have a lot of experience that probably have better judgment than a lot of people that have been doing it for years. You know what I mean? So
Yep.
it's not like you can prove that someone's got good judgment just by looking at a resume. You can't.
Right.
You know?
Well, and I think that there's many ways you could go about doing this. I think one of the things to consider is that different organizations call similar roles different things. So a recruiter or a hiring manager probably will not judge you based off of going from acting director to operations manager, because maybe that's the same job just in a different organization, which it is in this case. The other thing that you can do is, if you're, wondering how you might put this on your resume, you might list the the sister company, which is your new organization, and then in parentheses, originally, and then what your organization was. And then your job title could be both acting director and operations manager, especially if the actual work you're doing in both of those roles with different titles is the same. So there's ways to go about it that I don't think recruiters or anyone looking at a resume would say, this person was demoted, or took a significant downgrade in position. Especially if you're able, like, if they're worried about it, dig into it during the interview process and just explain that there was an acquisition, your role changed, even though you're doing the same work. And it can be as simple as that. I don't think, like Bill said earlier, I don't think people are going to be hung up on that. I don't think they're going to care that much.
Abby posted some links here. These were what, Abby? If you want to just explain what these links are.
I believe that was in response to a question about questions to ask at the end of a first interview. And so
Okay.
that's a link to a video about questions to ask at the end of your first interview rather than second or third round interview.
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you to Gagusta1 again for the kind words. P.S. The photo of me was taken 33 years ago. Oh my God. So you're a bright, fresh faced, clean cut young person. And then they see you and you're a seasoned veteran, shall we say. Yeah, you might not want to put a picture on your resume. If you are going to put a picture on your resume, make sure you look somewhat similar to what's displayed in the picture.
Yep. Yep. And that happens a lot. If you think about dating, there are people who might put a picture of their younger, more in their minds attractive selves
33
as
years ago.
their profile picture on online dating applications. And when they meet someone for the very first time, that person is taken aback by how differently they look compared to their profile photos. So
Just
it's
put a
that same
picture of a
thing.
young Brad Pitt on your resume and send that in,
Yes.
you know, or
If you're
Claudia
going to be
Schiffer.
using pictures on your resume, make sure they're current pictures.
For my resume, I'm just going to paste a picture of Claudia Schiffer. This is me.
Yes.
Hire me. Gary Lee Sanchez Cuerto, if I'm saying that right. The accent on the Cuerto when you have no idea how to pronounce it. Hello. Here, appreciating immensely your golden advice. Well, thank you very much. That's high praise indeed. Thank you, Gary.
Mm-hmm.
Could you please provide me some tips about what skills are looking for, are looking the business to work remotely? Thank you very much. What skills are they looking for someone they want to hire to work remotely? What would you say to that, Abby? I'm not sure.
I think one of the most important things is time management. If you're going to be working remote and you don't have an office to be in with someone to kind of visually check in on you, you have to manage your time really well. Time management leads to timeliness so that you're logging in at the times you're supposed to be logging in, that you're not late to meetings. I think a lot of the kind of remote work etiquette also includes participating. So if they're going to have meetings, that you are present in the meetings, that you're following along, that you're not trying to do other work during that time. So it's a lot of these just like kind of soft professionalism skills that you can learn but are kind of hard to learn. So if you're going to be working remote, you have to be a self-starter, you have to be able to manage your time well, you have to be able to prioritize, you have to be able to communicate really well. If I'm
Yeah.
communicating primarily through emails and chats and things like that, things can get miscommunicated relatively easy. People make a lot of assumptions. They might, maybe I'm accidentally writing in all caps and people think that I'm yelling at them. Like, you have to be pretty aware of your communication style and being very clear about expectations and things like that when you're working remote. Um, so
That
if
was
you're
the
looking
joke.
to get in,
That was the joke. It was Irish Arguments magazine that was written in all caps. Yeah, that's right.
yes, yes, all caps equals yelling, just in case anyone doesn't know. So don't write in all caps unless you absolutely must for some reason. Um, so there's lots of things that are like etiquette based that are probably also cultural based. My way of showing up in a remote environment in the United States is probably very different from someone in Japan who's showing up in a remote environment. So just keep that in mind, is that kind of based off of the culture of the organization you're working with, there might be some etiquette differences. You're in a great spot if you're a new employee working remotely, because then you can ask all these questions and get lots of clarity on expectations at the beginning. I think when people were remote employees and they had been employed with an organization for a while, people went in with a lot of assumptions, and that's where things started to backfire. But if you're new to this, saying, are we going to be expected to be in meetings for our team every week? How often do those meetings occur? How long are those meetings? Are we expected to be on camera? What's the
Do I
attire
have to
you
wear
expect me?
pants to this meeting? Oh God. Yeah, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Exactly. Um, what
That was
happens
the
if I have
it
a
was the son
conflict?
of Christopher Reeve that did that, right? That was the famous thing during the pandemic, right? He was on a news
Mhm.
interview or something like that, some morning show or whatever, and he was there with no pants because it's a remote thing. But only the problem was the camera is like showing all of this. So don't
Mhm.
make that mistake. Very important.
And many times people will think, well, like, oh, they're only going to see from here up. I don't have to wear anything special underneath. But then
Like
a tech
pants.
issue happens and you have to stand up and you walk in the frame or you lower your camera
Whoops.
and they suddenly is a view of all the things that are going on underneath. So yes, there's an etiquette that's probably organizational, and then there's some like I put it as common sense, but a lot of people don't necessarily think of it as common sense for some other things. So
It's very
I
hard to
think if you're
define common sense. That's the problem.
yes, yes. So if you're going to be new to an organization, ask all those questions. Get all of those things worked out at the very beginning. You're in a perfect position to be ignorant about it because you want them to spell out exactly their expectations of you from a remote perspective. But I think in general, time management and communication are some of the basic essentials for remote work. You need to be able to manage your time well, show up on time, accomplish your requirements on time, your tasks, whatever, and then communicate really well, not only with your direct supervisor, but with your team and with the customers or client base that you're serving.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Um, thank you to Klaus Micro 1080. Right on. Thank you very much. Lots of nice things. And at the same time, it makes me less nervous as the recruiter gives more details. I will try and use that. Absolutely. And John Anderson says 20-year sub vet.
I think
Okay.
submarine veteran is what I'm
Okay.
going with that.
I thought that might have been an American thing. Job underwater ICBMs
I don't
can't
know what
get
that is.
even an entry-level job as a 50-year-old white male. Help. Okay. I don't really get into the whole ethnicity, gender thing. That's just too politically charged, unfortunately. Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Okay, let's next question here. AI, my close personal friend AI says, thanks for the previous answer. Would it be an option to say that I have just been traveling for the past 4 years, which I've been doing a lot of because I could afford it? It doesn't sound like something you'd probably want to say in an interview.
Yeah,
That could probably
no.
be misconstrued, even if it was perfectly accurate.
Yep, and I think that person was wondering, they were the one who said that they got their degree in engineering in 2021 and then have been investing since. And so how they might be able to fill in the gap of employment. You want to show that you've been proactive and developing yourself during your time off or time away or time that you haven't been in the workforce. Organizations are going to expect that from you as an employee. So if you can demonstrate that you've been doing that as a non-employee, good. Saying that you've just been traveling because you can afford it is not going to impress a potential
No.
hiring manager.
Yeah, don't say that. Not a good thing to say. Yatsuba says, I once had an interview arranged by a staffing company. The
Mhm.
job offer wasn't something I was looking for. And when I was seeking information about career advancement, I saw it go nowhere. How clear, does that continue? Here we go. How
It does.
clear should I be when looking if I'm not getting opportunities at the moment, if I have to say no on an interview that doesn't have the right opportunities or path forward?
You know, this goes along the lines with what we were talking about earlier, Bill, where it was like, don't limit yourself up front.
Yeah.
See what they have to offer as you go through the process. Get them to love you, and maybe you decide you love them and you're willing to be a little bit flexible. If you have some things that are hard no's or things that must be in place, and you're working with a staffing agency, the staffing agency probably has some of those answers for you. So don't limit
Yeah.
yourself by thinking that you are entitled to X, Y, and Z and that everything must fit that, because that really limits it and will probably make your job search much longer than it needs to be.
Yeah, maybe take more of the attitude of like, I'm just here to listen to see what they're looking for.
Mhm.
And then once I understand kind of what they're ideally looking for, then I'm going to decide whether it's something I'm willing to do or not.
Mhm.
But I would, like Abby says, I'd basically do it that way rather than coming in and dictating and saying I need this and this and this
Yeah.
and this, or it's not going to work. You know,
Yeah.
it's very limiting.
Because how would you
And
feel if someone was doing that to you? You know, like let's say that you go to a restaurant and you're like, oh, well, I'm interested in, maybe this dish, this, and this dish. And then the waiter or waitress is like, well, if I were in your position, I would be doing X, Y, and Z. Like it just turns everyone off. No one wants that same type of behavior directed towards them. So why would you do it to an employer?
yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with that. AI says, thanks for the answer. Is it an option to say that I have just been traveling for 4 years, which I've done? Didn't we just, did I goof this up? I got the wrong question.
No, they put
They
that in
asked
the
it
chat
again.
again with a little bit different, like, and focus on entry level positions with less experience expected. If you're willing to, if you've been pretty successful with your investing and you're willing to take a position that might pay you less than what you've been making in the past from an investment perspective, yes, I think it's perfectly fine. Focus on those entry level positions. At the same time, you will probably be facing the same problem that a lot of recent grads are facing, which is they're wanting this experience, but I'm not getting this experience because they're not able to hire me. So it's this like vicious cycle. You want to be able to demonstrate the things that you've done that's relevant to the position that you're applying to on your resume. So while you might not have formal employment experience, what things have you done that is in a professional capacity you can list on your resume that's relevant to the position you're applying to?
Makes sense. Uh, what it says, vilify exile says, hey,
Mhm.
I've been worried about being overqualified for jobs. I have a master's, but I'm just now getting into my field of study and need an entry job. I'm afraid my master's is scaring away jobs.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a problem. To me, I go to my default answer for things like this because you don't fit into that pigeonhole of a typical candidate. So I recommend you get the job through networking. It equalizes all these things. It makes sure that they don't really have an effect, and it cuts right through the person wanting, right to the person wanting to hire you. So that would be my blanket answer for it. What would you say to this, Abby, if this person was going through more standard channels?
Well, if you're getting into a field of study from an entry level position and you have your master's degree, they might be a little bit more flexible because you've got this additional education that's specialized for the field of study. For example, I have my master's degree in clinical mental health counseling, and I can't get any jobs in clinical mental health counseling without that master's degree. Now, that might not be the same for your industry, but let's say that you got your master's in business administration. That might be something that actually elevates you over other candidates who are trying to get into business administration as an entry level candidate. So it might depend on the industry. We don't know what industry you're in. If you feel like it is truly limiting you, then maybe you don't list it on there. Maybe there's other ways that you can list your relevant experience, education, project work, things like that to demonstrate that you meet their qualifications. In many cases, at least here in the United States, there's equivalencies for hiring and like minimum qualifications. So if I'm looking for a job and it requires 3 years of experience or equivalent education, many times that master's degree covers those 3 years of experience. And I don't have to have those 3 years of experience because I have this master's degree. So keep an eye out for equivalency language on job postings. If you feel like you've been applying to jobs and you just get, you know, passed over before you're invited for an interview, it's probably something on your resume which could be education related. It could be unrelated to education. So there's a lot of things that could be going on. In most cases, if you're entering your field of study with a master's degree and it's entry level, I don't think that would put this like warning label on your application that you're not a good fit for the role.
Yeah, makes sense. Um, Nice analogy to see the HR's perspective. Yeah, that's the single biggest thing that I think a lot of job seekers want to understand and will help them do better is understanding the perspective of the person on the other side of the table. And it's not necessarily HR. Like if you're dealing with a recruiter, then I guess HR's perspective, but the hiring manager. The hiring manager is doesn't work in the HR department, by the way. Everybody hopefully knows this. The hiring manager is the person that if you get the job, they are your boss, right? Like they're the
Yes.
one that's triggering that job vacancy.
I would say in
And
90% of situations, the hiring manager is going to be your direct boss, your direct
yeah,
supervisor or
yeah.
manager.
And they don't work like unless you're getting a job in HR or something. I mean, 99% of the time, they're not going to be they're not in the HR department. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully everybody understands that. Um, Changing the subject. I don't think we had a subject. The subject
love
was
it.
how to get hired. So you
Yeah.
cannot change the subject far enough for our liking. So don't worry about it. You're doing fine.
And if you do, we'll ignore your comment and we'll move on to the next one.
There you go. You see, we can accommodate everybody. Nobody we
Uh-huh.
can't ignore. And that attitude comes straight from HR. Um, Ali Lay, I'm sure that's exactly how you say it. I had last interview last Friday morning, and the third party recruiter is very nice and transparent. Should I ask him for an answer, like in terms of whether you're coming back, whether they're proceeding with you?
Yeah. I think that's how I interpret the question.
Hmm?
Should you follow up with the recruiter essentially? And I would say always follow up after an interview. Send a thank you email to the recruiter, to the people who were involved in the interviews that you saw on Friday, after the interview on Friday. Now, if you've done that and it's still been crickets, it actually hasn't been that long. It's Monday. Your interview was on Friday. It's been less than a full business day since your last interview. I would recommend waiting 3 business days to hear back from them, especially if you kind of asked about next steps and timing and things like that after the interview. So if you haven't already sent that thank you follow-up email, do that. You're welcome to do that, immediately after the interview. You can send it today if you didn't do it after your interview on Friday. And then see if that prompts any information about next steps and, if they're moving forward with you or not. If you don't hear anything from that email, wait 3 business days and then send another follow-up email to the recruiter, and you can say, if there's any final questions for me, I'd love to provide whatever clarity or information. If you can provide me with any information about next steps in the process, I'd be super appreciative. That type of message is appropriate to send after that 3 business day waiting period. And 3 business days minimum. Many people say 5 to 7 business days. There's even someone a little bit further down in the comments who says wait a week to 10 days. So it's what you're comfortable with. I think 3 business days is the minimum you should wait before reaching out again.
Yeah, I would say, 3 business days is a good rule of thumb. Good afternoon to Duke, or if you're from the UK, Duke. If you're from the United States, Duke, right?
Duke.
That's right. And thank you to Klaus Micro 1080. That just rolls off the tongue. Thank you for being here. Duke says, I've had 3 interviews over the past month. I studied for each individual job description, but during all 3 interviews, the interviewer never asked questions pertaining to the interview. What did you guys talk about then? They're just like talking sports or, kind of the weather,
Yeah. Well, and I actually worked with a client who just let me know they had an interview on Friday, and the majority of the interview was actually spent with the interviewers telling the client about what to expect from the role and things like that. So interviews, while they are typically relatively standardized, don't always go that way. The fact that you've had 3 over the past month and they were not
You could have an
standard
interview
interviews is
about what the
interesting.
interview is going to be about, that kind of thing.
Right.
It's so meta, it's so tandem.
This is very similar. This was the same person who asked a similar question earlier.
So we've already handled that. Is that what I'm hearing? Okay.
We have.
Amazed. I recognize
Great
this person.
Great to see you, Amazed.
Yeah. If an employer can't clearly state whether a role is hybrid or on-site and takes offense when asked, it's a red flag about transparency or workplace culture. It's okay. That's just your license to escalate right there. They take offense to something, you take them to task on it. You really find out how far this goes. Right. No, listen,
and
if they take offense, it's bad all around, I think,
Yeah. And it goes back to, the timing of the question. While it shouldn't completely disqualify you from the consideration process for asking about remote versus hybrid versus in-person work during the first interview, it does send the message that that's more important to you than the actual job itself, which could be a warning to the person who's doing the hiring. So it's not necessarily that they would be offended by that type of question. It's just that you want to be a little bit more strategic about when and how you ask about workplace situations.
Just say, is this about my religious beliefs? And then no matter what they say, then you say, so it's about my mother. And then you end the interview. Gagusta, how do I make sure that I don't seem like I think I'm overqualified for the position? How do you make sure that you don't seem like you're overqualified for you apply for it? Maybe, I don't know. The only question is whether they think you're overqualified for the position, which is code for usually they think that you're applying for something below your pay grade. Like that's usually what that means, right, Abby? When they say overqualified, that's code for a few different things.
Yeah, and it might be that they think that you're trying to get your foot into the organization so that you can quickly move into a new position. They might think that you're old, and so that they are then judging you to say that you have too much experience. Really what it comes down to is your ability to communicate your confidence in a humble way. So if you're overly confident, if you are kind of talking down to the interviewer or the recruiter about the type of work that's being done, they're probably going to think this person thinks they're too good for this, or they think they're overqualified. But if you really focus on your transferable skills and you focus on being able to provide value to the organization and how your previous experience relates to this, that is a better way to communicate your experience without saying like, I'm too good for this, I'm overqualified, you should be paying me at the top of the pay scale type thing. And it's hard to learn that because you're not really taught how to communicate in a humble way. You kind of just learn through failing at communicating in a humble way and people writing you off because they think that you're too cocky or too confident or overqualified.
the thing, if you go to an interview and you say like, listen, I think this is a tremendous opportunity for me. It's an opportunity for me to apply a lot of the skills that I've learned and, to really get some practical experience with this and that and be able to help out and contribute and, learn some of the practicalities of this. I think that a lot of people would look upon that as like just the right attitude. You're saying the right things,
Mm-hmm.
so if you're worried about like they're viewing you as overqualified, meaning that, they assume that this job is beneath you. This job is, something that you could do a lot better than. And you want to try and dispel that notion or that myth that they might have. Just say like, listen, I'm very excited about this. It's a great opportunity for me to learn, a great
Yeah.
opportunity to apply my skills. This is why it's good. This is why it's good. This is why it's good for me. I'm really looking forward to this, stuff like that. I think that kind of helps to just dispel that overqualified thing as much
Yeah.
as is possible. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And if they blatantly ask you, like, it seems like you're overqualified for this position. Why do you want it? There's the perfect entry point to talk about all these great things as to why you are a good fit for the position, why the position is a good fit for you, why you're going to be happy with this type of role, things like that.
Yeah, like I'm looking for, a situation where I can do this, where I can apply these skills, where I can get this
Mm-hmm.
experience. This seems like the perfect thing, stuff like that. That kind of, if it is possible to persuade them that assumption is false, then saying
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that, I think, is the way to go. Let's quickly get through these. Abby has to basically go in a moment, I believe. So, uh, part two, we had a chance to ask follow-up questions towards a panel. That's where the interviewer panel would answer my questions towards the job description.
Mm.
Does that make sense to you guys? Yeah, that makes sense. You can ask questions, and that's
That
a good thing.
person was the one who said they had an interview, but it didn't have any standard interview questions. And so then it seems like they were probably giving a lot of information about the role, and then you had the chance to ask some questions, and that's where you're able to find out some more questions about the position that they
Yeah,
didn't
it does seem a
necessarily share.
strange way of doing it, but I mean, it does make sense.
Yeah.
Alex, as I'm going in 24 on a job fair to see jobs there. In general, job fairs can be useless or not. They can be useful, but it's mainly for more entry level people, generally,
Yep.
students and things like this, right? For job
Yep.
fairs, usually you're not looking for vice presidents and stuff at a job fair.
Right.
They're not
Yep. And I would say they're
useless.
not useless. They're a great opportunity to network and get an actual human being that you can connect with at an organization. At the same time, that human being is probably a recruiter and might get overwhelmed with the amount of people reaching out to them. But in most cases, it's a great way to put a face to the name and then get someone kind of in your corner to advocate for you within the organization.
Yeah. So more junior jobs, but generally not useless.
Hmm. Hmm.
The job search filters are useful. You may search remote or hybrid to increase your chances. Yeah, we were talking about that earlier, and that's something that I guess you could do when you're
Hmm.
like looking through posted jobs. Yes.
Hmm.
Uh,
And I think a lot of
Matt,
these comments are like comments just coming through general conversation. The next one that I see that's a kind of a good question is from Yotsuba towards the end, which is how and where do I network? And that's a
this one
really great question. I think it's two more down from there.
here.
Yeah, how and where do I
Sorry,
network?
we have to like
Yeah.
wrap this up. That's why we're skipping stuff. It's
Hmm.
not intentional. How and where do I network? You want to take that?
Yeah, well, and Bill and I could both go on tangents for hours about networking. I think the short of it is you have your network of the people that you know. There's probably 10 to 20 people in your life currently who you could start with your network. And then the other way to network is identifying organizations and roles that you're interested in taking and figuring out who those people are in those organizations and roles and connecting with them directly. So there's a couple
Yeah.
ways to go about it.
Yeah, and if anyone's interested, I have a course that takes you through that. It's linked in the description box below. If you're watching this on my channel,
Hmm.
it's called my Get Hired course, where
Hmm.
it teaches you several different methods of getting hired. And one of the big ones is like networking for introverts. And the idea is that, like Abby says, networking is a huge umbrella. There's a lot of things in it. One of them is like what Abby mentioned, where you're building on relationships with people you already know. So
Mhm.
you're hitting up people that you already know, maybe previous coworkers or things like that. Uh, you know, but also networking involves reaching out to people you don't know. For example, people that could have a job for you, right? Maybe
Mhm.
they are not posting a job right now, but they could have a job for you. Most jobs are not posted. And so that's called the hidden job market. This is like huge. And
80% of jobs are usually found through the hidden job market.
yeah, so like what you're seeing in terms of all the jobs you see posted online, that's like
Mhm.
something like 20% of all the jobs that are actually out there. There's many, many more that are not posted. So a big part of networking is reaching out to people you don't know in an effort to uncover those jobs. These people haven't posted anything officially, but they're actually hiring behind the scenes, right?
Mhm.
So you put yourself forward for those is the basic idea. So if you want to learn more about this, check out both our channels. Abby and I talk about a lot of the same kind of stuff. It kind of overlaps. She's got some great videos on like interviewing and stuff like that. Abby has worked as a recruiter for many years and done all that kind of stuff. So she has some great insight into recruiting and what the person on the other side of the table is thinking. And I'll let you speak for yourself, Abby, for this.
Yes, well, and just as a side note, if you're watching from my channel, whether it's my YouTube channel or my Twitch channel, I've linked to Bill's YouTube channel in the description. So you can click that if you're interested in diving into his Get Hired Now course, which is where he goes into detail about networking. One of the things that I do from a career coaching perspective is I'm an interview coach. And so a lot of times people will work with me to prepare for their upcoming interviews. We discuss interview strategy, typical questions you can expect during the interview process. And overall, just having a 45-minute session with me boosts confidence enough that you feel like you can have a much more effective interview. You go in more prepared, you feel more confident having a conversation with the other person on the other side of the screen or other side of the table. And one of the things that I provide with each of my clients is they'll send me a copy of the job description that they're preparing for. I will then prepare at least 30 interview questions that they can use to prepare for their upcoming interview, and then maybe even analyze their resume for potential gaps that could come up as, pain points during the interview process, blind spots that they might have, concerns from the interviewers, things like that. So while I do general career coaching, helping people decide what types of jobs to apply to, what types of industries to switch into, resume writing, and things like that. My bread and butter is the interview preparation sessions, where I work with people to
Yeah,
strategize for
and a
their upcoming interviews.
common question that I get on my channel that I'm sure everybody gets that talks about this stuff is, especially for people that are starting out and going for entry level jobs and stuff, the big complaint is that I get no feedback. All I know is
Mhm.
that I'm being rejected from jobs. They're telling me I did not get the job. I'm not coming back for another interview. The process ends, but yet I get no feedback. So how am I supposed to improve when I'm not hearing what the problem is, right? Now the answer to
Mhm.
that is the recruiters that are interviewing you, they don't work for you, they work for the organization, right? They don't have any interest or incentive to help you work on your interviewing technique or your job search, right? But that's
Mhm.
why you hire a career coach. Now I'm not a career
Mhm.
coach, okay? I don't do that, but Abby does. So if you're looking for someone to work with you to help you do well at interviews, to help you draft your resume so that you get interviews, things like this, Abby can help you with that. You work
Yep.
one on one. You have somebody in your court that's an advisor. It's almost like having a lawyer with you in court. They're on your team. They're rooting for you and they're working with you.
Mhm.
So if you're looking for that, check out Abby's channel. She provides these services. She does a great job. So check out that if that's what you're looking for.
Yep. And there's someone who posted in the chat, not that we have to highlight their question, but they do say that they've applied to about 250 applications over the last couple of months, but have only had 9 follow-ups. So they're not quite sure what's going on. So I posted a link in the chat as well. Again, I don't think that person's watching from my stream. They're watching probably from yours, so they might not see that link. But I have a video that's basically about what to do if you've been applying to jobs, but you're not getting any interviews. And that's something that I can work with you one-on-one with is evaluating your application package and seeing if there's any disconnect between the documents that you're submitting to the jobs that you're applying to. In many cases, you're just not going to hear back from the majority of jobs. But if you're getting very few, 250 applications and only 9 follow-ups, that is a very, very small percentage. You should be getting more interest than that. So in that case, I can help review your resume, your strategy with applying, the types of jobs you're choosing to apply to, how you're choosing to apply. That's all something that I think is an area that I could be of assistance if you're experiencing something similar.
Yeah, somebody says, Vilify Exile says, how do we get to her stream? So you should see our channel names on the screen right now. So Abby's channel is called Life Work Balance. Just that's the name of her YouTube channel. So just go there and you can see all her stuff and go from there. Okay, we are at the end of this. Thank you to everybody who participated. You guys are all awesome. We wish you the very best of luck. And we have been doing this traditionally every 2 weeks. So we may be back 2 weeks from today. That's still a bit up in the air, but check out our respective channels for, you can see what live streams we're doing, like it's coming up, right?
Yep.
It's scheduled in advance. And if you have any questions, we'll be happy to try and help you out. That's what we do.
Yep. Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Yeah, take care.